Let me tell you a story. It's about a young Josh, about 8 years old, and I picked up a book called Redwall. It was written by a guy named Brian Jakes, who wrote, I guess, children's stories unlike anything I'd ever read before. It was talking mice, they lived in an abbey, and the evil rats or ferrets would come and try and kill them, and they would survive through heroism and togetherness and courage that you would not think, I guess, would come from a group of mice and hedgehogs and whatever else was at the Redwall Abbey. That story, I guess, created for me a love of reading, a love of storytelling that obviously, if you've kept up with me in the past, you'll see it is transitioned into writing stories and telling them. The point of this is, I think we've all been in a place where I was as a child where like you devour books, devour them. Then as life goes on, maybe it's in high school, maybe it's in middle school, maybe it's in college, you fall out of love with reading. You forget the magic that you felt as a kid, and then maybe you come back to it or maybe you don't. This for me is the story of how I fell back in love with reading. This book right here was the one that brought it all back for me. Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. It was this book where I had that feeling, I guess, that I had as a kid again, where my eyes were opened and I experienced a world I'd never experienced before. I mean, so rich, so colorful, so brutal. It changed how I saw stories, I think. And it then also, I guess, fostered a love for telling new stories. And I guess it snowballed into where I am today. But, you know, this video is not just how I fell back in love with reading. It's also about how you can experience the same thing that I did, coming back to reading at a later age and realizing the wonder of it, the majestic nature of being in love with a book. I'm gonna give you 3 tips in this video for how you also can fall back in love with reading. Tip number 1, always have something to read. I think it is, there should always be building excitement about what you're reading. You know, for me, I've got them right here actually. I've got Way of Shadows chilling right here. I've got Joe Abercrombie over there. In fact, I think my wife would tell you I have way too many books that I'm not reading currently, but that I will read eventually, maybe, hopefully. Always have something on hand that gets you excited about the next book. Like, you don't want to fall into the rut of, oh, there's nothing to read, I'm just gonna go play video games. You want something to arrest your attention, I guess, away from other distractions. Like, maybe it's because I am a simple idiot, or maybe it's just symptomatic of the way the world is nowadays, but sometimes I would just much rather watch like Obi-Wan Kenobi instead of reading a book, or watch a movie, or, you know, play video games or whatever. You have to compete with the other vying attractions in your mind. And so I've always got books on the shelf that are next up on the TBR. So, you know, number 1, it's always have something that excites you. And that can be anything. It can be cross-genre. It doesn't have to be the same type of book every time, but always have something to look forward to so that you keep reading after the one that you just finished. Tip number 2, and I feel like this should be very self-explanatory, but it's just not. Don't finish books you don't like. There's a bit of there's some gatekeeping, I guess, when it comes to the reading community as a whole, the literature critique community and the writing community as well. Like, there seems to be, I guess, some guilt about not finishing books that you're not into, but like, that doesn't make any sense because it's a pastime. I guess if it's your job to read books, then you should probably not finish them. But how many people have that as a job? Like for most of us, reading is a pastime, a hobby. And so you should treat it that way. Like you don't do hobbies if they don't bring you enjoyment. And reading should be no different. If you're picking up a book and it's just not right for you at that moment in time, set it aside, pick up another one, because if you follow tip number 1, you'll always have something. Pick up the next one and read that, and maybe come back to it if you want, or you don't have to. Like there's no pact or code that you've signed with the author that you're going to finish their book. Sorry, authors. As painful as that sounds, as somebody who's even written things themselves, I have not co-signed anybody into reading my book. It is, they're gonna read it if they enjoy it, and if they don't enjoy it, don't read it. So don't be afraid to DNF. It's not as bad as it sounds. Tip number 3, the final tip to fall back in love with reading, is you've got to connect with community. So share what you're reading. I do that through this YouTube channel. I'm also on Goodreads, and I didn't initially pick up The Name of the Wind until someone recommended it to me. And like, that's just the way it goes. The interaction with your friends about what you're reading, the interaction with people that you know online about what you're reading, where you can have those conversations. Maybe you could even change your opinion about what you've read, or have a broader sense of what you read based on talking to other people about it. Having that community around what you're reading, I think, propels you forward. It's with anything, because we're social beings. And so if you're not getting that extra satisfaction out of what you're reading, simply just having a community where you can talk about it might be the extra step that you need to take in order to help yourself commit to reading that next book. And it's just a shared experience. There's something about knowing what happens in a novel. Same way with knowing what happens in a movie. Like when a movie first comes out, the joy of seeing that movie is seeing it with your friends and talking about it with them. It's no different with a book. Like being able to read a book, meet somebody that's also read that same book, and talk with them about it, like that makes the enjoyment of reading go that much more. And I think that is what's so special about reading, and being able to share those stories with the people around you. So maybe you clicked on this video because you remember that time when you used to devour books and you want to go back to that in the future, or maybe you've just started reading again and you're just excited about the prospect of devouring more stories. That's what this is all about. It's about creating that community, that step 3 part, the community about what you're reading. That's what this is here. So if you are reading something new, drop it in the comments below. I would love to, foster that community with you about what you're reading. Reply to somebody else that you see in there and talk with them about what they're reading. It is a communal activity together. Tell me below what you just picked up or what you're excited to read in the future, and we can all do this thing together. My name is Josh. I make videos about reading, writing, and personal development. If you enjoy what I do here, hit the like button, subscribe if you want to see more from me, and I will see you in the next video.